You are weak because you are reasonable. You have been sold a fairy tale, a story that says if you just explain yourself clearly, if you provide enough facts, and if you remain transparent, the world will treat you with fairness. You are waiting for a paycheck from logic. It is never coming. Social power does not care about your truth. It does not care if your intentions were pure. It does not care if you have a spreadsheet to prove you're right. Power is a raw form of energy that flows toward the immovable, toward the silent, and toward those who understand the dark mechanics of frame control. While you are busy being an honest communicator, waiting for permission to be respected, the Machiavellian strategist is busy building a fortress of silence. He understands what you are too afraid to admit. Social dynamics are not a classroom. They are a battlefield, and you are walking into a power struggle holding a pamphlet of excuses. I am going to hand you a weapon, but to hold it, you have to drop the heavy baggage of your social conditioning. You have to stop wanting to be understood. You have to stop wanting to be right. We are going to apply the ruthless, cold, efficient philosophy of Niccolò Machiavelli to your reputation. I will show you how to invert your psychology, how to exploit the predictable need for others to fill a void, and how to position yourself so that respect flows to you not out of love, but out of necessity. But be warned, once you see the power of the silence, you cannot unsee it. You will never be able to sit in a meeting again without seeing your colleagues as children begging for validation. Phase 1. The Trap of Clarity. The Explainer's Debt. Machiavelli wrote a truth that terrifies the modern transparent leader. He argued that a prince who tries to justify every action to his subjects becomes contemptible. To maintain a reputation for being fair, you must constantly explain your motives. Eventually, you run out of authority. To keep up appearances, you become a servant to the opinions of others. By trying to be understood for your reasons, you become mocked for your desperation. Translate this to your professional life. You are bleeding authority because you want to be seen. You over-explain your delays. You send long emails justifying your strategy. You check in to make sure everyone is okay with your decisions. You are purchasing a temporary feeling of safety. You are paying a likability tax. The Machiavellian approach to communication is cold. It is what the world calls arrogance. When you are building power, you must be stingy with your words. When you withhold your why, you are not being difficult. You are building a mystery. At first, people will call you uncooperative. They will call you elusive. They will stop trying to pull you into the petty squabbles where the blame is split evenly among the loudest talkers. Let them. Machiavelli argues that in time the silent man is revealed to be the truly powerful one. Why? Because by withholding his reasons, he does not need to seek permission. He becomes a law unto himself. Phase 2. The Frame of the Defendant. Despise the Justification. Robert Greene, a modern student of Machiavelli, crystallized this in the laws of power. Never defend yourself. Reframe the attack. We are wired to love being right. The need to correct a lie bypasses our critical thinking. But in the psychology of status, nothing is more expensive than a defense. When you accept the need to justify yourself to a rival, you enter into a psychological contract. You have acknowledged their right to judge you. You have lost your autonomy. You are weighed down by the heavy chains of the defendant's frame. The dangerous man does not defend. He ignores, or he attacks. He rejects the hookup of an explanation. Why? Because he wants to remain the judge. The free explanation is how the weak stay trapped. They chase the relief of being cleared and miss the loss of status. They spend hours crafting the perfect rebuttal to a coworker's slight, wasting mental energy that could have been used to dominate the market. To break out of the lower class of thinking, you must shift from a defender of facts to a creator of reality. If a rival questions your results, do not show them the data. Ask them why they are so obsessed with your department. When you explain, you pay attention to their rules. When you stay silent, they must pay attention to. Phase 3. The producer's silence, escaping the feedback loop. The social world is a farm. There are the shepherds and there is the livestock. The livestock are the explainers. They are fed a steady diet of feedback, performance reviews, and open-door policies. They are milked for their ideas and sheared for their loyalty. They are kept in the pen by a fence made of the need for approval. The shepherds are the dangerous. They create the narrative. They build the silence. They own the frame. You have been trained since birth to be a sheep. Go to school. Raise your hand to speak. Explain why you were late. To make Machiavellian moves, you must undergo a violent psychological shift. You must stop reacting and start imposing. Look at your last 5 conversations. They are a record of you being a reactor. Every sentence was an attempt to manage someone else's perception of you. You are transferring your life force, your status, to them in exchange for a momentary hit of being liked. Shift your identity. I am not a defendant. I am the evidence. This requires a detachment from your own ego. You must stop thinking about how you are being perceived and start analyzing why they are so desperate to pin you down. Study the pattern. Why does your boss ask for clarity? Because he fears losing control. Why does your partner ask for reasons? Because they fear your independence. Do not judge the pattern. Exploit it. Phase 4. Emotional alchemy, refusing the bait. Psychologists call it reactance. The burning urge to strike back when your character is attacked. This is why you are ignored. Your biology is wired to protect your reputation through noise rather than through presence. The Machiavellian mind overrides this biology. You must desensitize yourself to the feeling of being misunderstood. You must view your words not as a shield, but as currency. Most people are paralyzed by the question, what if they think I'm guilty because I didn't speak? The dangerous man asks, what if I speak and prove I care what they think? That is the true risk, lowering your value to match their accusation. Machiavelli said it is better to be feared than loved. In the modern office or social circle, fear isn't about violence, it's about unpredictability. When you stop explaining, you become a black box. People cannot map your triggers. They cannot predict your moves. They begin to tread carefully around you. If you cannot sleep at night because someone has the wrong idea about you, you are not ready for power. Grow up. The world is not your mother. It rewards the person who can stand in a room full of accusations and offer nothing but a cold, steady gaze. Phase 6. The burden of proof. How the person who talks the most carries the lowest status. In the theater of human interaction, there is a gravitational law that most people ignore until they are already plummeting. The more you speak to justify your position, the less space you occupy in the room. This is the burden of proof. In any confrontation, the person who accepts the burden is the person who acknowledges they are being audited. By launching into a frantic defense, you are essentially presenting your accounts to a self-appointed auditor, begging them to find you solvent. You have handed them the ledger of your life and asked for a stamp of approval. Status is inversely proportional to the volume of your explanation. Look at the architecture of a courtroom. The defendant stands and speaks at length, sweating under the lights, offering alibis and timelines. The judge sits in high-backed silence, occasionally offering a single, devastating sentence. The judge does not need to explain his ruling. The ruling is the reality. When you overtalk, you are signaling to everyone present that you do not believe your actions can stand on their own. You are suggesting that your reality is fragile and requires a constant scaffolding of words to keep it from collapsing. The predator understands that silence creates a vacuum, and human nature abhors a vacuum. When you refuse to fill the air with becauses and therefores, the other person begins to drown in the stillness. They expect a reaction. They crave the hit of your defensiveness because it confirms their power over you. When you deny them that hit, the pressure reverses. They begin to wonder if they have made a mistake. They begin to explain their accusation. The moment you feel that hot, prickly urge to set the record straight, recognize it for what it is: a biological trap designed to lower your status. High status is the ability to remain unaffected by the projections of others. To be dangerous is to be a closed system. Let them speculate. Let them whisper. The man who talks the most is the man who is most afraid of being misread. The man who is silent is the man who doesn't care if he is read at all. Phase 7. The Schoolyard Ghost. Why we still feel the need to explain to teacher as adults. The reason you feel a tightening in your throat when a boss or a peer questions you isn't logic. It is a haunting. You are being possessed by the schoolyard ghost, a lingering psychological echo from a time when your survival depended on the mercy of authority figures. From the age of 5, you were conditioned to believe that an accusation, no matter how trivial, required a formal deposition. You stood before a desk, eyes downcast, explaining why you were late, why the homework was missing, or why you were fighting. You were taught that the truth would set you free, but in reality, you were being trained to accept that someone else always held the right to audit your soul. This conditioning created a deep-seated explanation reflex. Now, as an adult, when someone throws a subtle barb or demands a justification for your choices, your brain misfires. It thinks you are back in the principal's office. You offer up your reasons like a sacrificial lamb, hoping the teacher in the room will give you a passing grade. But the corporate boardroom is not a classroom, and your rivals are not your instructors. In the adult world, when you explain yourself to a peer, you are effectively promoting them to the rank of teacher and demoting yourself to the rank of a child. The ghost whispers that if you don't speak, you are being disrespectful or difficult. It uses your own politeness against you. But the Machiavellian knows that politeness is often just a mask for submissiveness. The elite have successfully performed an exorcism on this childhood ghost. They realize that an adult who requires no permission also requires no explanation. When you stop responding to the phantom authority of others, you break the cycle of the subordinate. You must learn to sit in the discomfort of being unaccounted for. You must realize that the desk you once stood before is gone, and the only person who can demand an entry in your ledger is you. The moment you stop treating every question as a command to justify your existence, the ghost vanishes, and for the first time, you are the only authority in the room. Phase 8. The Alpha of Silence. Analyzing how world leaders use pauses to dominate loud detractors. To understand the alpha of silence, you must stop viewing a conversation as an exchange of information and start seeing it as a struggle for oxygen. In the presence of power, the air is thick. In the presence of the weak, it is filled with chatter. Observe the highest-level world leaders and masters of industry when they are confronted by a loud, aggressive detractor. They do not interrupt. They do not match the energy of the attacker. They do not lean in to catch the words. Instead, they do something that feels counterintuitive to the average person. They wait. They use the pause as a surgical instrument to dissect the opponent's desperation. When a loud detractor finishes their tirade, the natural instinct is to fill the gap immediately. But the leader understands that the gap is where the power resides. By holding silence for 3 to 5 seconds longer than is comfortable, they force the attacker to sit in the echoes of their own noise. In that stillness, the detractor's outburst begins to look less like a critique and more like a tantrum. The silence acts as a mirror, reflecting the attacker's lack of emotional control back at them. While the detractor is sweating, searching for a reaction to validate their existence, the leader remains immovable. This is the predatory stare, not one of anger, but of calm, analytical observation, as if watching a strange insect crawl across a table. The alpha of silence is not a passive act. It is an active reclamation of the frame. By refusing to speak, the leader signals that the detractor's words were not heavy enough to require a response. They use their eyes to communicate that they are waiting for something more substantial, more intelligent, or more relevant to be said. This creates an agonizing psychological pressure on the opponent, who often begins to babble or retract their statement just to break the tension. You must realize that whoever speaks first to break a strategic silence is the one who has lost the floor. When you master the pause, you stop being the one who reacts to the noise and start being the one who dictates the tempo of the entire room. Would you like me to move on to Chapter 4, the cortisol trap, to examine the biological urge that makes your heart race when you feel the need to defend yourself? Phase 9, the cortisol trap, the biology of why we feel the itch to defend ourselves. The moment you are challenged, your body becomes your own worst enemy. You feel the heat rising in your neck, the tightening of your jaw, and the sudden frantic thumping in your chest. This is the cortisol trap, a prehistoric biological survival mechanism misfiring in a modern social environment. Your brain has detected a threat, but it cannot distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger and a condescending remark from a colleague. In response, it floods your system with stress hormones, preparing you for a physical fight. But because you cannot swing a club in a boardroom, that aggressive energy is diverted into your vocal cords. It manifests as a desperate, rapid-fire explanation. When you are under the influence of this cortisol spike, your prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic and strategy, begins to shut down. You lose the ability to think 3 steps ahead. You become reactive, not proactive. You feel an almost physical itch to speak, believing that if you can just get the right words out, the threat will vanish and your heart rate will settle. This is the lie your biology tells you. In reality, the more you speak while flooded, the more high-pitched, thin, and defensive your voice becomes. You are leaking victim energy, and every predator in the room can smell it. They see the physiological distress and realize they have successfully breached your perimeter. To become dangerous, you must learn to biohack this reflex. You must recognize the cortisol trap the second it begins. When the heat rises, that is your signal to do the opposite of what your body demands. Instead of leaning in, lean back. Instead of speaking faster, take a slow, silent breath through your nose. By controlling your physiology, you regain access to your strategic mind. The itch to explain is merely a chemical illusion. If you can sit in the fire for 60 seconds without opening your mouth, the hormone level drops and the power shifts. You realize that the threat only had power because you were willing to exhaust yourself fighting it. When you master your biology, you stop being a puppet of your own hormones and start being the one who controls the temperature of the interaction. Would you like me to proceed to Chapter 5, Holding the Mirror, where we discuss the tactical art of reflecting an accusation back onto the attacker? Phase 10, Holding the Mirror. The art of reflecting an accusation back onto the accuser. When an attacker flings an accusation at you, they are handing you a hot coal. Most people instinctively catch it, burning their hands as they try to examine the truth of the coal or polish it into an explanation. This is exactly what the manipulator wants. By accepting the premise of their question, you have accepted the burden of the coal. Holding the mirror is the tactical refusal to catch the heat. It is a psychological parry that forces the attacker to confront the ugliness of their own reflection. The technique is deceptively simple. Instead of answering the accusation, you question the motive behind it. If a rival sneers, "Why was this report so late?" the explainer offers a list of technical hurdles. The dangerous man, however, simply tilts his head and asks, "What makes you so invested in the timing of my department's workflow?" Or, "Why are you choosing this specific moment to bring this up?" You haven't denied the claim. You have simply moved the spotlight. You have turned the defendant's seat into a mirror. Suddenly, the room is no longer looking at your lateness. They are looking at the rival's aggression. This creates a phenomenon known as reflective anxiety. Because the attacker expected a defensive wall to hit, they are now stumbling forward into a void. They must now explain themselves. They have to justify their curiosity, their tone, or their timing. By shifting from the answering machine to the questioner, you have seized the highest ground in the hierarchy. You are the judge, and they are the one being scrutinized. The beauty of the mirror is that it requires almost zero effort from you. You are not building a case. You are merely pointing out that the person across from you is acting strangely. When you hold the mirror, you reveal the hidden agenda behind the concern. You stop being the prey and start being the observer. And in the world of dark psychology, the observer is always the one with the most power. Would you like me to move on to Chapter 6, the So What method, to explore how indifference can be used as a weapon to neutralize personal attacks? Phase 11, the So What method. Using indifference as a weapon against personal attacks. The ultimate insult to a manipulator is not a clever comeback. It is a total lack of interest. Most social attacks rely on the hook, a bait designed to snag your ego and pull you into a high-stakes emotional exchange. When you react with anger or a detailed defense, you confirm that the attacker's opinion has the power to wound you. The So What method is the psychological art of absolute indifference. It is the refusal to grant an insult the dignity of a reaction. When someone attempts to undermine you with a pointed observation, perhaps mocking your background, your lifestyle, or a perceived failure, they are looking for a wince. If you wince, they win. If you explain, they win. But if you meet their attack with a shrug and a "so what," you have effectively neutralized their ammunition. You are signaling that their standard of judgment is irrelevant to your reality. You aren't arguing that they are wrong. You are arguing that they are insignificant. This is the boredom strategy. In Machiavellian circles, appearing slightly bored by an opponent's aggression is a devastating power move. It suggests that you operate on a level so far above them that their attempts at sabotage are merely white noise. While they are vibrating with the effort of trying to provoke you, your pulse remains steady. You are the mountain, and they are the wind. The wind can howl, but the mountain doesn't feel the need to explain why it is still standing. By adopting the so what mindset, you reclaim your most valuable resource, your attention. You stop being a puppet whose strings are pulled by every passing critic. You become a black hole for drama. It enters your orbit and simply disappears into the void of your indifference. When people realize they cannot get a rise out of you, they stop trying. You become dangerous because you are unreachable. Would you like me to proceed to Chapter 7? Reverse the frame, where we learn how to become the questioner instead of the one answering. Phase 12. Frame dominance. How to set the rules of the conversation before a word is spoken. In every interaction, there is an unspoken hierarchy between the one who asks the questions and the one who provides the answers. To answer is to be a servant. To question is to be the master. Most people spend their lives in a state of answering obedience, reflexively responding to every query thrown their way as if they are under oath. They don't realize that by answering, they are implicitly accepting the other person's right to set the topic, the tone, and the boundary. Reverse the frame is the tactical shift from the witness stand to the judge's bench. The secret of the Machiavellian strategist is the refusal to be the answering machine. When a rival asks a loaded question designed to pin you down, such as, "Why did you skip the protocol on this deal?" the amateur begins to explain the technicalities. The professional, however, ignores the question entirely and probes the source. They respond with, "What specific outcome are you hoping to achieve by focusing on protocol right now?" Or simply, "Who told you that was your concern?" You have not just avoided the trap, you have forced the opponent to justify their own existence in the conversation. By reversing the frame, you expose the power dynamic. Questions are the steering wheel of the mind. Whoever asks them determines where the thoughts of everyone in the room will go. When you are the one asking, you are the one exploring the other person's weaknesses. You are searching for their inconsistencies, their gaps in logic, and their hidden motives. This creates a state of information asymmetry. You learn everything about them while revealing nothing about yourself. To master this, you must develop a high tolerance for the silence that follows your counter-question. Let them stammer. Let them try to find their footing. The goal is to make the act of questioning you so psychologically expensive that they never attempt it again. You become dangerous because you are no longer a source of information. You are a source of scrutiny. Would you like me to move on to Chapter 8, the fog technique, where we discuss how to agree with a grain of truth while completely rejecting the insult? Phase 13. Strategic ambiguity. Why being mysterious is more protective than being transparent. When an attacker launches a critique, they are looking for a solid wall to crash into. They want you to deny, to argue, or to get angry, because a wall gives them something to push against. The fog technique is the art of becoming mist. Instead of resisting the blow, you offer no resistance at all. You agree with any grain of truth in the accusation, but you remain completely detached from the implied insult. You offer a soft, impenetrable surface that absorbs the impact and leaves the attacker swinging at thin air. If someone says, "You're being incredibly stubborn about this project," the explainer will list all the reasons why they are actually being principled or thorough. The dangerous man simply says, "You're right, I am being stubborn about this." By agreeing, you have destroyed their momentum. You have taken their weapon and laid it on the floor. There is nowhere for the argument to go. You have accepted the what, but completely ignored the so what. You have agreed with the observation without accepting the shame they tried to attach to it. Fogging is the ultimate tool for maintaining your internal state. It allows you to acknowledge the other person's perspective without giving them an inch of authority over your identity. It creates a psychological cushion between your ego and their tongue. You aren't lying, and you aren't fighting. You are simply being honest in a way that makes you untouchable. When you agree with a critic, you signal that their opinion of you is so secondary that you don't even feel the need to correct it. The attacker is left confused. They expected a battle, but they found a cloud. They realize that they cannot hurt you because you are not trying to protect anything. You have reached a level of strategic transparency where you can admit to a flaw and in doing so, prove that the flaw has no power over you. By refusing to be defensive, you become a ghost in their machine, present, visible, but impossible to capture. Would you like me to conclude with Chapter 9, The Untouchable Mindset, and reveal why those who stop defending themselves gain automatic, permanent authority? Phase 14. The King's Peace. Reaching a state where your self-worth is independent of public opinion. The final transformation into a dangerous individual occurs the moment you realize that your authority is not a trophy to be won, but a frequency you emit. Most people live in a state of social debt, constantly over-explaining their actions to pay off the perceived interest on other people's opinions. They believe that if they can just provide enough evidence, they will finally be granted the untouchable status they crave. They have it backward. Authority is not the reward for a successful defense. It is the natural byproduct of refusing to enter the courtroom in the first place. When you stop defending yourself, you signal to the collective subconscious that you are no longer a subject of the hive. You have stepped outside the circle of common accountability. This is the God tier of social dynamics. People naturally begin to treat you differently, not because you have become more virtuous or more skilled, but because you have become more expensive. You are a high-value asset that does not offer a discount for anyone's curiosity. You have moved from a resource to a power. This mindset is built on a single chilling realization. The world does not want the truth. It wants a leader who is certain enough to ignore the question. When you remain silent in the face of judgment, you create a psychological event horizon. People cannot see inside you, so they fill that void with their own awe and fear. They begin to police themselves in your presence. They stop asking why and start asking, how can I align with this? You are no longer defending your identity. You are defining the reality in which others must live. The untouchable mindset is the end of the struggle. You no longer care if you are dangerous because you have become the environment itself. You have mastered the art of being immovable. You have stopped explaining, and in that silence, you have finally found your voice. You are no longer a participant in the game. You are the one who owns the board.